Welcome to the Two Stewards Show. Toronto condos have been dubbed dog crates in the sky, thanks to Ron Butler for the vivid picture. Now, this wouldn't be such an issue if only the dogs had enough money to buy the crates. But, you see, the market has stalled and not a single mutt can afford a lofty cage. This issue has caught the well-trained ears of kennel masters at the municipal, provincial, and federal level. The top dogs are gravely concerned for their chances of being re-elected and have been pawing at the ground and howling at the moon to come up with a solution to the House of Crates on their hands. The one saving grace in all this is that thankfully the dogs don't have nest eggs to worry about. If these were bird cages, the problem would be much more severe. Today, Mark is here to present the glorious condo solution. How big is this mess? How can the top dogs get us out of it? And will your fragile nest egg remain intact? I wasn't able to join Mark for this one, so if you thought the Two Stewards Show was an echo chamber before, wait till you hear this episode. To get in touch with the show, visit twostewards.ca. Remember, this show is not financial advice, but is valuable for listening amusement purposes. And now, Marky Mark and the glorious condo solution.
All right, folks, I am flying solo today. A few days behind, and Brent can make it. So this will be a shorter episode. But I was just ruminating on some of the issues, as I always do, some of the issues we have in Canada, but a couple ones in particular. And then I thought, hey, here's a solution to these issues. And I'm surprised that nobody has come out with this yet. I Googled it. I haven't found anybody who's come up with this potential solution. So I'm going to lay out the issues, and then I'm going to lay out the potential solution, and also some counterpoints to that. And I'm not necessarily advocating for this, but I think it would be, for the Liberal government, just a fabulous answer to some of the problems that we're having. So the first problem that I'll lay out, which we've talked about at some length, is the number of unsold condominiums and just the whole issue with the condo market in Canada, right? People talk about the housing market, and there is certainly an issue with ground level housing, so like single family homes, townhomes, all that stuff. They're also not being built, but the real big critical mass issue is in the condominium market. Now, this is primarily Greater Toronto area, Greater Toronto, Hamilton area, and to a lesser extent, Vancouver. So just some very rough numbers, initial ideas. We have around 23,000 units, 23,000 condos in the GTHA, that are unsold. So that's stuff that is being built, like it's in the process. So the construction has started, but not all the units have sold. Units that builders hung on to and did not pre-sell because they thought they could make some more money once the units were once the tower was ready. So it used to be they would just try to sell everything, and then eventually once they saw the rate of rise of prices of the condos, they would hold on to a percentage and then sell them at the when the building was ready. And that was fine because, it worked for a while, for a number of years. They did well, investors did well, but now nobody's buying. So the builders are sitting on a lot of this inventory. And then, just units that people are going to have problems with, problems closing on. Oh, there's about, like I said, 23,000 or so in the GTA. And again, these are rough numbers. We're doing rough numbers today. And around 4,000 or so, it sounds like, in the Vancouver area. So not as big an issue, but still a big problem. Average value, looked around, we could say $1,250 per square foot. Average size, again, it's hard to find this, like the average size of a condo in Canada, but we know that the majority of these were pretty small. As Ron, the angry mortgage guy, has said, they're dog crates in the sky. So we're talking, I used an average of 550 square feet per condo. for this example. And, they might be bigger, maybe they're smaller, but you're not seeing a lot of like 2-bedroom condos being built, right? These are all small things that investors could afford and presumably would get a little bit of cash flow from. That not a great model. We're not going to get into that right now. Just the facts, man. So anyways, that would give me an average value of about $687,000. And again, so this is for like a 550 square foot condo. I mean, right there, you look at it and you're like, that doesn't jive, because I could probably get a single family home, in, let's say Hamilton or outlying areas, maybe not right in Toronto, but a home for, maybe with a 900 square foot main floor and an unfinished basement for that same price. And, we're so we're talking about a much, much smaller unit for that price. So you can see where the problem would be, right? When prices were going up, it was fine. Now that prices have come down, it's not fine. So that value is around, if you multiply, say 30,000 units by 687,500, you're around $20 billion of inventory. Well, these are sort of the numbers around the problem, right? And you might think, well, what's the big deal? A lot of people are going to be out some money, and builders are going to have a hard time. What we're looking at, and analysts have looked at, is just a collapse in new home building, right? We've already seen it stop. The only thing that's getting built right now is condos that were being built, that were planned out years and years and years ago, right? Because the typical life cycle of a condominium building could be between 4 and 7 years from pre-sale to actually completion. And 4 years would be pretty quick. So, you think of like a 5-year project. So if people 5 years ago, and hey, I'm just full, what's the word? Disclosure. I'm one of those, not in Toronto in Niagara Falls, but we've got a condo we're waiting on being built. A bit of a different story, but in any case, it could be a 5-year time frame that you're waiting for this thing to be built. So that's the only stuff that's getting built. Anything that has a quicker time frame to be built is not being built right now, because nobody's building. So we're looking at a collapse in real estate in the GTA, and to a lesser extent, Vancouver. Right? There's bigger economic factors as well, but the condo market is a real problem, right? If you look at the biggest industries in Canada, what's the biggest industry? It's real estate. 13% of GDP over the last couple of years, which is huge, right? When you add related construction, so like investment in construction, so you can think of people buying homes and fixing them up, people building homes, that kind of thing. That's another 7 or so percent. So now we're around 20% of Canada's GDP is centered on real estate, right? Which is crazy. And it's all stuff that, for a large part, we are buying ourselves. We've talked about the foreign investment. A lot of that has been tamed. And, I don't have the numbers on how much of that would be foreign money laundering. So I'm sure there's still a lot of that going on. But still, it's mainly a self... like a Canadian consumer industry. So 20% of our GDP is centered on real estate. If this triggers a collapse in real estate, we have a real problem on our hands. And this is what we're looking at. We're looking at recession already, and the real estate issues are just going to exacerbate that. So if you think about who's exposed, so first you have workers. People are working, building these towers, right? No more new stuff's going to be built. So anybody who's finishing a project, they're either moving to the next project to build it quicker, to limit exposure in the form of higher costs because of inflation. But at some point, the work's going to end, and there's going to be a lot of people out of work. We have consumers who are exposed. So we've heard lots of stories of consumers who can't close because they counted on a higher closing cost or a higher price at closing. So if you're counting on your condo being worth, being appraised at $1 million, at closing, and now the bank tells you actually it's worth 800,000, and you've got to come up with another $200,000. Like, that's a big blow. And then when you consider we have a fair amount of speculators, so you see stories of people with multiple condos. They may be able to scrape together 200 grand, but if they have 3, 4, 5, that's insurmountable. So there's a fair amount of consumers that are exposed here as well. And, the number 30,000 that I talked about doesn't really take that into account. We're seeing growing numbers of people just walking away from their condos and just saying to the builder, like, sue me. And when I say they're walking away, they're dropping their deposits, right? They're just forfeiting their deposits of maybe 100,000 or 200,000, right? Depending on the price that they paid for the condo. So significant amounts of money that they're walking away from, but they just can't do it. And in some cases, people are being pushed to bankruptcy because they just can't do it. And so you could see some of the ripple effects of that too, right? If you're going to bankruptcy because of this, let's say you have credit card debt. Well, you're probably just going to throw that into the bankruptcy as well, right? Instead of trying to pay that off. So now you've got sort of ripple effects of this bankruptcy affecting other companies, banks, credit card companies that didn't really have exposure to the real estate industry. So consumers are exposed. Companies, especially like the big builders, that especially those that are leveraged further out to build these buildings and are relying on bank financing, they're exposed, right? The banks may pull the financing. It's not great for the banks either, but for these companies, some of them will just go out of business. Other ones are holding on, and some of them have been a little more prudent in how they build and not taking a lot of financing. But it's still going to be a hit for them if they have a lot of people walking away from condos and they just have half a building unsold, right? That's a failure, and that's going to affect their ability to compete or just to be around. So this is one of the things that we're looking at is, a lot of home builders, condo builders are going to possibly shut their doors. And so while we have a glut of condos right now, in 3, 4, or 5 years, when we need more housing built, especially in the form of condominiums, these companies may not be around, right? These are companies that have been around for a long time. If they shut their doors, they're not going to open again. So other people may start companies, other companies can fill the void, but you're just looking at a net loss of companies and a net loss of employment. So I mentioned banks as well. Banks have a ton of exposure because they do a lot of the financing for the condo builders. When you build a tower, you generally don't have all the money. Some builders self-finance, and that's great, but I think that's few and far between. So you're looking to a bank to say, yeah, we'll give you money, right? So you got to sell maybe 20, 30, 40, 50% of the units up front. And once you have them sold, then you go to the bank, say, look, here's all my contracts. We're going to, we want to build. Will you give us the money to build? And the banks will say yes. So now when you're looking at people walking away from these contracts, like, what are the banks going to say? Are they going to pull the funding? And, they're making loans based on payback schedules and expectations of profit. But, if these companies go out of business, what happens to the loans that to the credit that the banks have extended? I don't think we're going to see any banks go under in Canada as a result of this. They have increased their loss provisions significantly in regards to especially condos. They're pretty well financed. I don't think they're going to go out of business, but it will certainly lead to a tightening of credit. And that's a big problem in our economy because our economy runs on credit. And when banks don't extend credit, you get a recession. I mean, I think I've argued for a while that we've been in a recession for, at least a year, probably longer. But like this would be a much bigger, nastier recession. The banks are really the linchpin of this, I think. If they look at their losses and they say, like, we're having a tough time, we got to tighten our credit so we don't have more losses, or we just don't, have the money to put into other industries. Now, that let's not go on a tangent here about banks. But really, we know it's true. That's not true. That they run out of money because they can just create money, right? But they do have internal rules that they'll work with. So if they're losing a lot of money in one sector, is the same reason insurance goes up. Your car insurance may go up for no reason other than the insurance company lost money, maybe in home insurance or in some other kind of insurance, or your home insurance goes up because more cars are being stolen. It's the same thing. You'll see that ripple effect with banks. So they may tighten up lending for a time. So that is problem number one, just the number of unsold condos and potentially the condos that will be unsold, that were sold and that people are walking away from. Problem number two is affordable housing. We've also talked about this a fair amount. Mark Carney has talked about this quite a bit, and there is I'm just trying to look it up here. They put out a bill, and I don't know what bill it was, but they've got this Build Canada Homes. So this is a new federal agency. They're capitalizing it with $13 billion. So they're going to get $13 billion to start. There's no government program that has ever gotten smaller. We know there's going to be a lot more money put out. So the whole point of this is to build homes, is for the government themselves to actually build homes. And if you read through the press release, I think it's pretty funny because none of it's going to happen the way they say it do. But they say they'll have the potential to cut building timelines by up to 50%, reduce costs by as much as 20%, and lower emissions by approximately 20% during construction. Blah, blah, blah. A new housing industry, one that builds faster and more sustainably 365 days a year. That is hilarious for a government that can't get its own employees, bureaucrats to come into the office. And like any other program we've ever seen run by the government, it does worse than private industry, not better. Anyways, it is an issue, affordable housing. And just as a side note, if you've seen any of the announcements that Carney has made on the affordable housing front, where he'll be like in a construction area and you see like a building behind him, well, that building was just a wall constructed for the photo op. And, if you see some of the pictures that people took, you can just see, like, it's a big wall, and it's got Tyvek on it, so it looks like a building under construction. But, there's just a whole lot of 2x4s and structure behind holding it up, but it's not a building that was actually being built. It was just a facade they did for the photo op, and it's going to be torn down. So just ridiculous. And it's just indicative of the fact that they're not going to actually build anything. I would be very surprised if they actually build one house. We already had a housing plan under the Trudeau government, and they built not one home. They financed some things and they helped along existing projects, but no net new homes for billions of dollars that they spent. So, anyways, their plan is to build at scale. Great. So that is the second issue, is the housing affordability. And that takes many forms, but you could say, housing is unaffordable, rent is not affordable. And I mean, most of this stuff is not aimed at people purchasing homes. Any of the plans that the government comes up with is not for home ownership generally. They throw a few bones out there through CMHC and stuff, but mainly it's meant for rental housing. So here's a crazy idea. Instead of spending all this money to repurpose Crown land, because that's part of the thing they want to do with this plan, is to take Crown land and buildings and the old post office, and then either tear it down or revamp it and build above it, and that's going to be help save money. Instead of doing that, why not just buy all the condos? buy all the condos that are unsold, that are at risk. And I thought about this like, okay, what about just a bailout or partial ownership? But really the way for this to work, for the government to guarantee affordable housing, is for them to buy all these condos. And, we had Rich Diaz on recently, and I could just see his like veins in his forehead like starting to bulge out at this idea. But just hear me out. I'm not advocating for this, but what I'm saying is I wouldn't be surprised if we see something like this come up soon. It solves a bunch of problems, especially for the Liberal government. Right? They're heading into more turbulent economic times, and they've been able to sort of fool people for a while, saying like, no, everything's great, and especially boomers who aren't feeling the pinch as much as young people. But people are starting to call their bluff and saying like, no, actually things are really bad. Like, my groceries have doubled in the past couple of years, our rent is crazy, I'll never be able to buy a home, all this stuff. So this is a possible solution. They will be able to provide some affordable housing. So, what's 30,000 units when you're looking at the overall housing market? It's not a lot, but I mean, how many do they think they're going to build with their building programs, right? Not 30,000. So, number one, you can provide some affordable housing. You can get consumers out of a jam. And so the affordable housing and getting consumers out of a jam. So I'm talking about the people who are over leveraged, who are going to have to declare bankruptcy, or who are just going to have to close on Condo and put down a lot more money and be cash flow negative for a long time. So it's going to hobble them economically. This is especially in the GTA, which is vote rich, and where the Liberals didn't do as well as they would have hoped last election. Right? You can buy a lot of votes by doing this, right? You can provide housing that is more affordable for, at least in the GTA, 25,000 people. And I mean, maybe more if you just say, you know what, we'll buy the whole building and make it affordable housing for people that, could afford to close. So it's the people who are in the GTA who are at risk because they bought too many of these condos. And then also people who are renting in the GTA. Who now could have affordable housing. Because if the government owns it, they could set the rent at whatever they want. It doesn't matter. And again, I'm not saying this is a good idea because it's going to mess with rental markets probably, especially if you have like a huge disparity, right? You could say, well, we're going to rent out this condo in downtown Toronto for $1,200 a month, right? Ludicrous pricing, but they could do it because they don't have any. They don't have to be profitable, right? That's not the point of this. You could avoid some of the, I talked about some of the consumer bankruptcy ripple effects. Probably not a lot of those, but some, right? So you could avoid some of that stuff. You could save companies and jobs, at least initially. So where a company might just have to shut down because they got completely burned, well, now maybe they can at least break even on a project or make a bit of money and try to find other things for employees to do, maybe in a reduced manner. But the point is, these companies could be around to come back in a couple of years, and if they actually can make good their covenants with the bank and say like, okay, yep, we got out of this, we paid you back, we're good. They would be eligible for further credit down the road. Long-term survival of the company. Right, which is critical because when a company shuts down, as I mentioned before, there's not an immediate replacement for it. Right, you have lots of expertise that leaves, and that whole thing is gone, and it's not coming back. The critical issue is that this may solve a big problem for banks. Right? Banks who are very exposed, and it's not just banks either, right? There's pension funds, there's private investment funds, there's mortgage investment corporations who are all involved in financing these condos, but especially for big Canadian banks, right? At least if everybody walks away from this break even, at least if they're not losing billions of dollars, that's huge, right? And what that does, again, is maybe it avoids the banks tightening credit overall, right? The government is going to be, by all by all accounts, going to be unleashing a huge amount of money into the economy come November 4th, when the next budget, if we actually see a budget, is projected for November the 4th. So everybody's thinking like this is going to be a huge deficit. We've already seen a huge deficit this year. We don't know exactly, but we're probably around 100 billion plus. We don't know because they haven't released a budget. But this is just people kind of, working on the abacus and adding things up. So probably a deficit much bigger than 100 billion. And just for reference, 2019 to 2020, we had a budget deficit of $39 billion, which is big, very big. 2020 to 21, which was COVID, right? The big COVID year, we saw a deficit of $327.7 billion. Next year was 90 billion. The next year was 35 billion. So it was going down. And then 23-24, we saw that go up to 62 billion. And, if you remember, Chrystia Freeland quit because the budget deficit was going to be too big, went past the guardrails. Just laughable. But we're going to see, 24-25, probably over $100 billion deficit. And then the next budget, which was released on November the 4th, who knows? 200 billion? I don't know, right? The government has some cover here, as we found from voters, because of the Trump effect, right? I would say it's Trump derangement syndrome, right? It's amazing. What people will do because of Trump, right? Like if Trump says, "Hey, don't take Tylenol if you're pregnant," that is an instant trigger for many, many pregnant women to start swigging Tylenol on TikTok and Instagram and stuff. Just ridiculous. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can Google it. But there's apparently a link between acetaminophen and autism, and so people will do anything to just spite Trump or try to prove him wrong. But in any case, because Trump is there, the government can spend any amount of money and say, like, we had to do it because of Trump. Like, there's tariffs, everything else. So if they're going to run a huge budget deficit and do a big program like this, now's the time to do it, right? So I mentioned, what did I say? Look back at my notes here. The possible value of unsold condos right now is $20 billion, rounded up to $30 billion. If you're looking at a budget deficit in, maybe hundreds of billions, what's $50 billion to buy all these condos, right? And then provide affordable housing. For the banks, getting back to them, we're they're not going to tighten credit, maybe, if this scenario were to play out, and then with the government spending all the money, what's going to happen to asset prices, which is not going to help the affordability thing. But the issue is, if the banks did tighten credit significantly, that would really nullify the effect of the government spending a whole bunch of money, right? So they want to get the most bang for their buck. Like, let's get lots of money out there and also keep the banks lending money. Boomers, right? Speaking of Trump derangement syndrome, boomers will also stay happy for now because home values maybe then would not continue to plummet, right? We've seen maybe the bottom of house prices in Ontario anyways, Ontario, BC. Hard to say, but I feel like we've seen that bottom, and now they're stabilized and will slowly increase. But a big depression, big recession with more people unemployed would probably have a negative effect on house prices again, which would be bad for boomers, right? If they're in their retirement years and they want to sell their biggest asset, which is their primary residence, if they're getting less money for it, they'll be unhappy. So keep boomers happy for another few years, maybe one more election cycle, right? Eventually, I think when things go off the rails, the Liberals will be happy to hand government over to the Conservatives and then just say, like, oh, you guys You guys did a terrible job when they were just handed something terrible to begin with. Unemployment as well, right? It's starting to get nasty, right? We've seen youth unemployment, especially because of the immigration policies in some areas like Toronto, like 20%, right? And I think it's actually much higher than that. If you look at the demographics of who is working low-wage jobs, it's overall seems to be, foreign students, temporary foreign workers. And like you just have to go to a fast food place to see that. So I think it's much higher than 20%. They're probably just not counting kids who are not looking for part-time work anymore. But just overall unemployment is approaching 7%. So once you add in the condo construction industry in Toronto, which, you get mad because this is Toronto-centric, but is a big driver of economic activity in Canada. Once all those people aren't working, right? Unemployment is going to go up more. And you know what? You're going to be paying more benefits, more unemployment benefits when that happens as well. So just another argument to, spend the money now instead of spending it later. So you could look at this as a cheaper solution to affordability than the new program, the new federal agency that they have put out. We know in the long term that will not be, because it's government spending and it's going to increase, it will increase unaffordability or decrease affordability, right? Because inflation rises, prices go up, and we know that assets are going to rise in price as well. Not value, but price. And you could call it something nice, right? I thought of an acronym, the Citizen Rescue Affordable Homes Plan. If you work out the acronym for yourself, but, if you have a nice name and a nice presentation, like much more palatable to people, right? So I could just hear some people, and myself included, with the counterpoints like, no, the system has to cleanse itself, right? It needs to rinse all this bad juju out and just be cleansed, and it's going to hurt. And like, that's what happens in a capitalist economy. I mean, really, do we have a capitalist economy? I don't know. But that's the idea anyways, right? So anybody who's conservative or libertarian is going to be like, no, just let the fallout happen. It sucks for people, right? If there's bankruptcies, if there's companies that go out of business, if there's people that get unemployed, but it's not like this has never happened before, right? We'll get through it. And our addiction to real estate and addiction to these ridiculously small condos is not healthy. And there needs to be consequences for this. Government should just, in general, not spend as much money. So that's also a good idea. I'm a big advocate, like reduce all your spending except for law enforcement, military. And these are good points, but in reality, the government is not going to stop spending. They're not going to reduce spending until they have to because of a credit crisis or something. And yeah, the system should be cleansed. Does the government really care about that, really want it? Especially in view of all the factors that I've listed, including votes, getting votes, right? This is a big thing. It's early in the game right now, right? They're in the first year. The Liberal government, Carney, is in the first year of a 4-year mandate. But hey, why not strengthen their voting base right now? Which again, especially in the GTA, they could use some bolstering. Very politically palatable, as I mentioned, right? They'll get votes, especially in BC and Ontario. Alberta, they already hate the Liberals, so there's no harm done there. And then if you think about the East Coast, well, I mean, who's building all the condo? It's newfies, so they'll be happy that they get to keep working, right? So across the coast to coast, it's a winning plan. It's not exactly nation building, and Carney just announced the Office of Big Project, I don't know what it's called. Office of Big Projects, I'll call it, right? They want to have like 5 big national projects. And they had talked about liquid natural gas line and stuff like that. And now they seem to be backing off, and Carney is back to his net zero ways. But anyways, this is could be a big legacy project. right? Again, COVID deficit, $327 billion. Nobody really squawked about that. I mean, some people did, but liberals are back in government. So again, because of Trump, right? Because of the gift to the liberals that was Donald Trump. So if you combine something like this with interest rate drops, this could give the illusion of a healthy economy, and so give the liberals some bolster them in the polls and give them some staying power, maybe enough to push them through to the next election. And again, for Mark Carney to be like, hey, there was a big problem, Donald Trump, and I came in and I solved this problem, right? We did not go into a huge tailspin, our economy. People are working, there's affordable housing. I don't agree with any of this, but I think it's a golden opportunity that I'd be very surprised if we don't see something like this come out. And especially with Doug Ford, who is, really, he's just an extension of the federal liberal government. He's been banging the table asking for interest rate drops. He, talking about the economy in Ontario. This is going to be a big problem for Doug Ford as well. So I think he would be all over this. So I don't know. Let me know what you think, folks, in the comments. If is it a possibility? Is it a terrible idea? It probably is a terrible idea, but will we see something like this? Who knows? This is where my mind goes. So we'll wrap up there. Thanks for listening, folks, and you will get to hear Brent and myself next time. But until next time, steward your wealth wisely.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Two Stewards Show. If you like my voice better, click subscribe.
If you like my voice better, click share.
If you like both, give us a 5-star rating.
To learn more about the show, head on over to twostewards.ca and explore our free resources. To interact with the show, feel free to reach out at hello@twostewards.ca.
We will see you in the next episode. In the meantime, steward your wealth wisely.
Nailed it.